Okay, we're going to start first with just something sort of left over from Halacha Aleph, which is the Ramah said in Halacha Aleph, Sim Kuf Chav Halacha Aleph. He's talking about a certain case. We didn't even mention that case what it was. It's not important for us. But he mentioned that in a certain case where there's a question whether you should do Tevillah or not, the Ramah says you should both blood bracha. Okay, you should do Tevillah without a bracha. And that repeats itself many times in the Siman, in Poskim, whenever we come across some kind of a question of whether you shouldn't do Tevillah. So lots of times that the end result is Yitbo blood bracha. Do the Tevillah, but don't make a bracha. And what's the thinking? Or what's the logic behind such a din, or such a rule? And that would be is you want to be machmir to do the Tevillah. You also want to be machmir and not do a bracha she'en tzricha. So you do is you do the Tevillah, but you don't make the bracha. So therefore you've done your mitzvah if it needed to be done, and you haven't made a bracha she'en tzricha in case it wasn't supposed to have bracha. This is sort of like a compromise, and it happens. You'll hear many times here in this. Okay, now the way most people would think of it is that the reason why being machmir to do Tevillah, why are you being machmir if you're not sure about Tevillah? Because Tevillah is a din deraisa, and therefore since Tevillah is a din deraisa, so you have to be safek deraisa l'chumrah. As opposed to the bracha, that's safek brachas l'chumrah. So you're machmir on the Tevillah. So Pri Chodesh says, if so, what happens if your shaila has to do with a thing that needs Tevillah only with the Rabbanan? At most, in the case, the Ramos is talking about the possibility of what needs Tevillah is something that was lead, which is Chiyuv with Raisa. He says, what happens if something only Chiyuv with Rabbanan, like it was glass? He says, so then you shouldn't be Mechoyev to, because then the Safek would say Safek Mekula, not Safek Mechum, not Safek Raisa Mechum. Okay, that's what he says. Others say differently. Dr. Tshuva brings many people who say otherwise, who say that no, Tevillah is such an easy thing to do that a person shouldn't leave themselves with a chiyuv, with a suffix on a mitzvah, even on a mitzvah d'Rabbanan, when it's so easy to resolve it just by dunking into the mitzvah. It's easy enough. You're not mechuyev to do it. Okay.
It's not always
What do you say?
It's not always
Good. So that in that case, it could be he would say when it's only d'Rabbanan, then he'd be makel. That's fine. The Pri Chodesh says he says basically if only be machmir because of the right, then by glass b'chal don't be machmir. Okay. That's okay. Now that's one thing. Now the second part of that is that you may know that in Hilchos Kriya Shema is this din which says like this: if a person said Kriya Shema, and he wasn't sure if he said the Birchas Kriya Shema, then he doesn't repeat that because it's a Safek Brachas L'Hakol. It's a Safek D'Rabbanan, and he can be mekel. What if the person is not sure if he said anything, if he said Kriya Shema either? So then he repeats Kriya Shema because it's a machlokes in the Gemara, but we paskin that Kriya Shema is a din deraisa. So therefore you have to say over Kriya Shema. And the din is not only that, but you say over the Birchas Kriya Shema also with it. Okay? So poskim are scratching their heads like, what's going on over here? Why would he say Birchas Kriya Shema? Again, I told you a second ago, if a person knew he said Shema, didn't know he said the brachas, he doesn't repeat them. He doesn't say the brachas over, because Safek Brachas L'Hakol, or you don't want to say a bracha she'en tzricha, however you want to say that. So why, if you say Kriya Shema, do you say the Birchas Kriya Shema at the end of it also? So there's a lot of people talk about this, as you can imagine. The Mishabur summarizes the two main answers to that question. Okay. The one answer is, it's a special din of Birchas Kriya Shema. Chazal, some made it hakana, exactly how we know that it's not so pashut, but Chazal made a rule that if you don't know if you said Birchas Kriya Shema, and if you're saying Kriya Shema over, you must say Birchas Kriya Shema with it. They made a special rule. Kriya Shema always has to come with Birchas Kriya Shema also. So if you're repeating Shema because you think you might be employed to, then you have to repeat Birchas Kriya Shema also. So if that's true, it's a special din of Kriya Shema. It has nothing to do with anything else. That's one answer. The other answer is that even though we would say Safek Brachas L'Hakol, if there's a cheskes chiyuv, if we know that the person was mechuyev to do the mitzvah, like Kriya Shema, he woke up in the morning, he was trying to say Kriya Shema. So, and he was trying to say Birchas Kriya Shema. Now it's a question whether he did it or he didn't do it. In that case, even though the bracha is only d'Rabbanan, you have to do the bracha. You have to do the bracha anyhow. As long as you're doing the mitzvah d'Oraisa, you do the bracha with it. That comes along with it if there was a cheskes chiyuv. Okay, that's the second answer. So now that potentially could be the Yetos also. So what it is like this? There's only one, as I see it, there's only one case that the Shulchan Aruch says that you have to make a Safek Brachas L'Hakol. Okay? There are lots of poskim say it in many other cases. Poskim talk about it all over the place. It's that you should Tevillah without a bracha. As far as I know, there's only one place it's in halacha test that the Shulchan Aruch says you should do Tevillah b'lei bracha. Okay? So I'll mention it. I'll probably remember to say it later also. Over there, the Mechaber says you should just know when I tell you you should make a bracha, a Tevillah without a bracha. If you have a choice, you should do Tevillah with another kli that needs a bracha. Okay, why lose that on the bracha? You might as well do with another kli that needs a bracha also. That the Mechaber says. The Rambam say, other people say, the Shach says over here. Not everybody says that, but the Mechaber does say that you should have a choice to make a bracha. Now, what's the case of the Mechaber there? Okay, I'm not going to give you all the detail. Too confusing. But the case of halacha test is like this: someone who was not Jewish had a kli, and the Yid got the kli in a way that it was not clear if it was chayiv in Tevillas Keilim or not. Okay, what the case is not important to us. He got it in such a way that maybe it was chayiv in Tevillah, maybe it wasn't. He wanted to use it. This is going on in Nissan, so he wanted to use it. So he tabled it because he wasn't sure. It wasn't clear if he needed to or didn't need to. Okay, then the Yid completely bought it. Okay, whatever the in-between case was not important. He then completely bought it, and now it's for sure that it's chayiv in Tevillah. So now he's going to table it again, because maybe the first time he was tabling it wasn't chayiv in Tevillah yet. So maybe his first Tevillah was nothing. So now he's tabling it again. Okay, so the other Mechaber says when he's tabling it the second time, he should be tabling it below Bracha. So seemingly in that case, it should be a case of there was cheskes chiyuv. We have a kli that a week ago belonged to a guy, now it belongs to a Yid, so for sure it's chayiv in Tevillah. But that kli is, and then now you're being tablet, so you should say, according to that, the other answer that the Mishnah report, you should say is, if there is a cheskes chiyuv, you should be according to tablet without bracha. This question is brought in Chagos Piyamin, and he answers, but once you hear the answer, you'll hear it's pretty straightforward, which is, when we say that there has to be a cheskes chiyuv, means is, there was a time that I could point at. This morning at 7 o'clock, I sure had to say Kriya Shema. Okay, there was a time we could point and say, at that point you're for sure Mechuyev. Over here, it's true that this thing was definitely chayiv in Tevillas Keilim, but there's no minute in the day that I could ever point at that it was chayiv. Because when the Yid first got it from the guy, at that point it wasn't clear if it was chayiv or not. By the time it got to the point that in Iyar, when the Yid finally had it, for sure it was his, it might have already had Tevillah. Maybe it was chayiv in Tevillah a week ago, and at that point they already had the Tevillah. So there's no time in the day that we can point and say, at that point there's for sure chayiv, and then the chiyuv can continue as a cheskes chiyuv from then on. So therefore, it's not a clear right to this case. Okay. So much for that. Okay, now, Mitzvah, I'm going to start Beis and Gimel. Halacha Beis and Gimel. We're going to talk about how to do Tevillas Keilim. Okay? So, as I'm wont to do, I'm going to first tell you all the things that we're not going to talk about performing Tevillas Keilim. Okay? Where they're going to be. Just because I'm telling you about how you perform Tevillas Keilim, I have to tell you, okay, here's a bunch of things that having to do with how you do Tevillas Keilim that are going to be later on. What happens if you have a cord on an electric appliance? We're going to go over your base. Who's supposed to do the Tevillah? That's later towards the end of the Siman, you Dalet and Tezvav. Tevillah on Shabbos is at the very end of the Siman, Tezayin.
You tell us to stay quiet.
And then, what?
They already told us to stay quiet.
To stay quiet, what do you mean?
Don't ask about it.
I wasn't like that what I had in mind, though. In Siman Reish Beis, the Mitzvah will do after the Siman, is all about Chatzitzes. And then, Halacha Vav, Zayin, and Ches have all kinds of things that have to do with doing tefillah about the things being inside of each other, and they're touching each other, and opening the water, and the bubbles, all those kind of things are in Halacha Vav and Ches, Vav, Zayin, Ches. And I think it's the very last thing in Reish Beis, is that a kli has to be in its put together form when you do tefillah. Okay? So these are all the things we're not talking about today. Okay? So we're going to start like this. I have three things I want to talk about how you do tefillah. Okay? And the first one is like this. There's one Mishnah about Tevillas Keilim at the end of Avodah Zarah, Ayin Hem Beis, and the Mishnah says like this. We might as well read. I don't think we've read it yet. If you buy something that you use from someone who's not Jewish, so the first thing is, if it's a thing that needs just tefillah, lahato means just tefillah, means it doesn't need to be kashrus, it just needs tefillah, because let's say the guy uses it for cold, let's say it's a new kli, it only needs tefillah, you should do tefillah. Lahagil yagil. If it's a kind of kli that was used, and it was used in a way that only needs hagala, like you use it with hot water, or something like that, yagil. L'lavin ba'ar, y'lavin ba'ar. If you bought the kli from him and it needs libun, then you need to do libun also. Okay, and then the Gemara explains that the Gemara right away explains that even the ones who need kashering also need Tevillas Keilim also. Okay? So the order in the Mishnah is, first it tells you to do Tevillas Keilim, and then it tells you, then it tells you Hagalas Keilim. Okay? The Mishnah is saying, if it needs only, at the minimum it needs Tevillas Keilim, some need Hagalah, and some also need Libun also. Okay? So that's the order of the Mishnah, and that's the order of Shulchan Aruch. It's Siman Kuf Chav. Is our Siman, it's about Tevillas Keilim. Siman Kuf Chav Aleph is about Hagalas Keilim. Okay, Siman Kuf is Tevillas Keilim, that's the first thing in the Mishnah. And Siman Kuf Chav Aleph is Hagalas Keilim, that's the second thing in the Mishnah. Okay, that there are cases that need Hagalas Keilim. Okay, so that's the order that we have in front of us. That's the order in the Mishnah. But that's not the order of how you're supposed to do it. Okay, the Mechaber in the second halacha in Hagalas in Kuf Chav Aleph says, even though this is the order, it says Tevillas Keilim Kuf Chav. Hagol's Keilim and Kuf Chav Aleph, even though that's what it says, but that's not the truth. Really, a person needs to do Hagol's Keilim first. Really, a person needs to do Hagol's Keilim first, and the reason is because it looks like, I don't know if it really is, but it says it looks like it's Tevillah v'Sheretz B'Yodeh. It looks like a person's doing the Tevillah while the Kli is still treif, so somehow it looks bad to do that. So Mamela, the person should do Tevillas Keilim first and Hagol's Keilim first and Tevillas Keilim second, even though you wouldn't know that if you were turning the page to Shulchan Aruch, so to speak, in the wrong order. That's what you're supposed to do. Okay, to the point that the Mechaber has a daya. He brings a daya that says if you did the Tevillah first, you maybe have to do it again. Maybe have to do it again. That's not the din. But even such a shita that even says it, I'll just tell you how seriously, so to speak, that should be. Okay. So the Dogma Rav over there says that there's an exception to the rule, and that is like this: the reason why you're supposed to do Hagala before you do Tevillah is because of this thing of Tevillah v'Sheretz B'Yodeh. So he says, so if the Kli is Ein Ben Yomer, if the Kli hasn't been used for 24 hours in Cain, then the Kli, there's nothing treif about this Kli anymore. If there's nothing treif about the Kli, there's no Tevillah v'Sheretz B'Yodeh, and you could happily do the Tevillas Keilim first and do the Hagol's Keilim. That's what Dogma Rav says. What he's saying is, if you're listening between the lines, is you're not allowed to use a Kli that's Ein Ben Yomer either. It's not like you're allowed to use that. But that din d'Rabbanan, that you're not allowed to use a Kli that's Ein Ben Yomer, is an issur on me. I'm not allowed to use the Kli that's Ein Ben Yomer. The Kli is 100% kosher. There's no sheretz in that Kli anymore. After it's Ein Ben Yomer, the Kli is perfectly mutter. Chacham put an issur on me. Don't use it when it's Ein Ben Yomer, because you might make a mistake and use it when it's Ben Yomer. And that has, if you remember, maybe Moshe's still here from it. Way back when we went to Hagol's Keilim, we spoke about that it has enough gemina to how we kasher certain Keilim. It happens to be in that case about from a chol stam, certain kulas about how we kasher Keilim because of the fact that a kli that's Ein Ben Yomer is an issur on meat to kasher rather than that there's treif in the kli. So I'm going to use it and rather than there's treif in the kli. That's one thing. So, second thing is that Rabbi Yashiv takes out of this Dogma Rav a specific din, and he has an example. He says, there are people who, when they buy new pots, they kasher those pots. And the reason is because, we talked about this once, also in Hagol's Keilim, that new pots are buffed with animal fat. And therefore they want to kasher it too, because they're concerned about bleeders or leftover from that buffing that they do on the new pots. Okay, there are people who kasher the pots. So Rabbi Yashiv says, we spoke about them, why we don't think we have to. Okay, but anyhow, but he says that there are people who want to do that. He says if you want to kasher your pot when it's new, it's obviously Ein Ben Yomer, since the person did that. I mean, it's considered in the store. It's Ein Ben Yomer. He says, so then it's okay to tevel it before you kasher it also. That's okay to tevel it. Okay? Which is based on this Dogma Rav. And just again, between the lines here, he's saying that although the person's concerned that they buffed it and they managed to smear animal fat on the outside as they're buffing it, that fat is considered to be blia, not to be be'en. Okay? Rabbi Schwartz said exactly the same thing about a similar case, about cast iron pots. We spoke about that a really long time ago in Hagol's Keilim, at the very beginning, about cast iron pots. The same idea, which is, although someone put on a be'en, nobody here sees that be'en, and for all intents and purposes, we consider it to be a blia, not to be a be'en. Even though, so to speak, it's a residue, but in din, we consider it to be a blia, not to be a be'en. Okay. Next. Okay. The Mechaber says in Halacha Beis, Tzarech shehei, I'll read the beginning of it. Tzarech shehei hakli rafui biyodeh b'shas Tevillah. When a person does Tevillas Keilim, the kli has to be loose in his hand. He can't be holding on to it too tight. Why? If he's going to hold on to it too tightly, then his hand will be a chatzitza, will prevent the water from being in contact with the kli, and therefore he has to make it loose. Okay, I'm leaving the end of the Mechaber for a second. Okay, so that's what the Mechaber says. You don't hold it too tight. When you're tightening it, you're holding a cup in your hand. Don't hold too tight. Hold it loosely when you put it into the water. Okay? The Shach says, my paper is here. Okay, that's the Mechaber says. Look at that. Okay, the Mechaber says you have to have it loose. You have to have it loose in your hand when you do Tevillah. And the Shach says you should just know. No, he says not everybody agrees that. He says there are some people who say that there's a concern that the person is going to hold it too tightly. Okay, he might hold it too tightly, and therefore you shouldn't do it. And he tells you, go look what I said. he says if you look in Hilchos Nida, the Mechaber says the same thing. If a lady is being tevel and she's afraid to fall into the water, someone shouldn't hold her hand. Ellen came unless they hold her loosely, because the same idea. If you hold too tightly, it'll be the chatzitza. So hold it loosely, and then it won't be a chatzitza. The Shach says Yishno. Shach says there in Hilchos Nida. He says almost the same thing over there. He says no. I feel rifsa loy also tefillah. No, you can't do that. Even holding loosely, gzer atu loy rifsa. Because we're concerned that maybe you won't loosen your hand enough. Okay? And therefore, you shouldn't do this thing, which is to hold it loosely. And he says that here in Tevillas Keilim also, shouldn't do so loosely because it might not work well. Okay, now, I'll just point out to you that the Shach over there in Hilchos Nida has a hezber for that din that does not fit for Tevillas Keilim. Okay? The Shach over there in Hilchos Nida says it has to do with the fact that there are two people there, and each one is the lady who's walked into the mikveh is afraid of falling in. So she's going to hold on tight, or she's going to make sure you hold on to her tight. As opposed to, now that svara has nothing to do with the kli. Okay, the cup doesn't care if it falls into the mikveh. Okay, the cup is not giving me feedback that says hold on to me tightly because I'm afraid to fall in. Okay, that's it. Okay, so there's another possible nafkamina is there's a sefer called the Pesach Tshuva here brings that it could be that this issue, this thing of you're afraid that the person's not going to hold on tightly, is only get to Hilchos Nida. We're going to see in a second about Netilas Yadayim, where if the person doesn't do the tefillah properly, then something's going to be wrong in the future. Okay, what's going to be wrong here is in Hilchos Nida, she'll still be tummy. In Hilchos Netilas Yadayim, the hands will still be tummy. You'll be doing the wrong thing. The Isha will be usher to her husband. The food will be usher to eat because you didn't wash your hands. There'll be something wrong afterwards. As opposed to in Tevillas Keilim, I have to do a mitzvah. On the rice level, I have to do a mitzvah. So I'm going to try to do the mitzvah properly. If I didn't do the mitzvah properly, there's no long-term ramifications, because the thing is that the kli is somewhat there. The rice, you can use it afterwards. It's only the rabbanon that you're not supposed to use it. So these have a long-term problem. If the nida or the netilas yadayim didn't happen properly, then there's a problem, because then tomorrow you didn't have netilas yadayim. But tomorrow you can't eat this piece of bread. Well, I'm not letting you can't eat this piece of bread. As opposed to by Tevillas Keilim, there isn't any nafkamina, so to speak, in the future. Okay. On the other hand, I'm going to stick it to you before we get to the Netilas Yadayim. There's a difference, which is, okay, let me get into the next case and I'll explain to you this nafkamina. In the Netilas Yadayim, the Mechaber says, you have to take off your hand, a ring off of your finger during the Netilas Yadayim. Okay? You have to take a ring off your finger for the same reason it's going to be chatzitza. And the Rama says, Fafilu Rafui. You got to take it off even if the ring is on loosely. Why? He says, who roughly? Some people make it if it's roughly. Why they make it if it's roughly? Because if it's roughly, what's the problem? The water's going to get in. So all of a sudden, in the Netilas Yadayim, the Rama says a variation of what the Shach says, which is not that. What we read the Shach to mean is we're afraid you're gonna so you might hold on too tightly, and you might grip on too tightly. The Rama says it'll drop differently. Maybe that's what the Shach meant was that's possibly the Shach meant. He says ain't on the Keilim, people don't have such an exact. It's not so clear what's tight and what's not tight. How much is too tight that the water can't get in, or that the water can't get in? So the Rama is saying from a variation of what you're supposed to be doing. Okay, now. Now you hear the case of the ring. There's a nafkamina between the case of the nida and the ring and our case of Tevillas Keilim, and that is our case. I mentioned beforehand the reason why Tevillas Keilim was the most kal, okay, but there's a reason why it's more chomer also, and that is by the case of Tevillas Nida and the case of the ring. No matter what, if you did the wrong thing, the tefillah is going to work anyhow at the end, because it's only on the rice level, because it's only a meal. Okay, how much of the hand could a ring cover? Okay, how big is your ring? Or a lady who's holding another lady's hand, how much of her hand could she be covering when she's holding the other person's hand? So there's a possibility to say that in that case, it's the least reason to be machmir and choshesh. Maybe you'll do it wrong, because worst comes to worst on the rice level, it's going to work. The ring covers up, 5% of my hand, so it's only a meal. So worst comes to worst on the rice level, it's going to be okay. It's a meal, even if it's a meal hamakbid, even if it's mutter rice, as opposed to when I'm tailing the kli, it's possible that my holding on to it will cover over a rive of it. If I take a cup and I stick it in, it could be I'm going to cover over a rive of the kli when I do that thing. In which case, if it's a chatzitza, it'll be a chatzitza that'll make it possible even for the other. Okay.
Practically speaking, there's also a difference.
That what?
That's it. So take off the ring. So just take it off. You're not going to lose anything.
Okay.
Regarding for the woman who's like, oh, she's a grade, so therefore...
We have reason to be more, it's harder to be goyzer on her. She needs some talking.
Here also the Tevillah's Keilim, maybe it's going to drop, maybe it's going to break.
Okay, so the person's afraid. So we have what to lose, so we have more reason to be by Netilas Yadayim. Maybe that's why the Ramaz, maybe why the Ramaz Machem and Netilas Yadayim. Big deal, just take off your ring. Okay, maybe that's the reason. I didn't think of that, but maybe that's the reason. Okay. Lamais is, on the Lamais level, we're going to get back to this in a second. Okay, I'm sorry, I forgot one thing. The Ramah says, in Tevillas Keilim, in Sim Reish Beis, he tells you there's definitely such a thing as doing when it's loose. The Ramah says like this: if you have two Keilim one side of each other, okay, you have a Kli, b'toich Kli. He says you can do that as long as it's roughly, the two Keilim are roughly one the other. They're not tightly connected to each other. So the Ramah in Tevillas Keilim says at least there's a case that he's being made to allow. He's not worried that no, it's going to be too tight and they're not going to be touching each other. Okay.
We're not supposed to be discussing that.
What do you say?
No, we're not supposed to be discussing that.
It's smart.
Okay,
but for this part, okay. Okay, so, okay. Wait, that's supposed to be in the truth. I meant to do that. It's not important. We'll get there. Okay. That's a shout out. I just want to bring the point here. That's what we're not discussing. I just want to make the point here is just that to be, the Ramah allows you using that roughly, that just loosely touching you. You're not so worried that it's going to be too tight. Okay, fine. Most people... So you missed. I don't know if you missed the other slide. Okay. So the most people will title things that they're holding loosely in their hands. Okay. But I have one more thing to tell you. The end of the Shulchan Aruch, maybe why they're doing it for a little bit of a different reason. And that's like this. The Mechaber says like this: if you made your hands wet before you held on to the kli, so again, the Mechaber said, hold on to it. Don't hold on to it too tightly. Because if you moisten your hands beforehand, there's nothing wrong. Don't worry about it then. Because the water, it's all of a sudden it's not a chatzitza, because now there's water all around the kli. There's kli, water, and then your hand on top of it. Don't worry about that. So then there's water in all places. Okay, that's what the Mechaber says. But the Ramah says the dafka shelichlech yoda b'mei mikvah. When the Mechaber said you could just get your hands wet, but I don't agree with that. He says, what you have to do is you have to get your hands wet with mei mikvah. Okay, and have a light mind solution, not with water that's been separated, that's loose. Okay, the Mat Yenison says it over here, and the Ramosha says what the Ramah means is, he doesn't mean is you just take mikvah water that you scoop out. He means is that the person, we're talking about Tevillas Keilim, the person sticks their hand into the mikvah, and their hand is wet with mikvah water that's still in the mikvah. Okay, and what the person does is, let's say they were toveling this thing, you don't have to tovel a pen, but let's say you tovel this, they put your hand into the mikvah, and then you pass it into your other hand. So the kli gets into your hand with mei mikvah between the kli and your hand. As opposed to, it doesn't mean is you just stick your hand into the mikvah and then you grab the kli and stick it in. Okay? When we say it has, the Ramah says it has to be the mei mikvah, he means is the hand is in the mikvah and you put the kli on top of it, the water never left the mikvah. Okay? That's what the Ramah says. Okay. Okay. The others will argue that. I don't know why that's right there. Okay. Anyhow. So the Ramah says you have to make your hands wet beforehand, and the Chacham says he's making about the first thing which was that if you hold it in a loose way, that's okay. The Chacham is okay with you doing that, like the Keilim had said at the beginning, with what we saw here, that if many people had said that if you hold it loosely, it's okay. But he's machmir to say that the Ramah about this part, that if you want to do it by getting your hands wet, you have to have your hands wet with mei mikvah. So you have to put your hands into the mikvah and pass the kli into it like that. Okay.
Here's a question.
Yes.
By Hashar Keilim, we say that, regarding Libam, that we're afraid that the Keilim might break, and therefore you might not
do it properly.
So I would say if you're holding on to something loosely, why are we afraid that maybe you're afraid you're going to drop it, so you're not going to be told properly?
I'm not sure. Probably because over here, Tevillah is a well. Over here, Tevillah is more clear cut. If I got into the water, it was in the water. So it's Hagal's Keilim. I might not do it long enough. I might pull it out too quickly. But what you're saying that maybe I won't do it properly is when we say is maybe there ought to loy ravsa. That means is I'm afraid that because I'm so scared of falling into the mikvah or dropping my cup into there, I'll hold on too tightly. That's sort of what those people are saying. And that's what they're concerned. Okay. The last thing is like this. Okay. The last thing is like this. The halacha gimel. The Mechaber says Yivorach al Tevillas Kli. The person should make a bracha when he's Tevillah, and the bracha is a sheikh Shulchan says it's one al Tevillas Kli to be Tevillah Kli. If there's two or more Keilim, then Mevorach al Tevillas Keilim. Then you say a sheikh Shulchan says it's one al Tevillas Keilim in the plural sense. Okay. So the Mechaber says you say the bracha two different ways. The Aruch brings that some have the custom. I know people like that, but the custom they say al Tevillas Keilim no matter what. Okay. They always say al Tevillas Keilim in the plural sense. Okay, but most people follow what the Mechaber says. If they're doing one kli, they say al Tevillas Kli. If they do many keilim, do al Tevillas Keilim. Okay, what happens if a person has a pot with a cover? Okay, is that a Tevillas Kli or is that al Tevillas Keilim? Okay, so the Rabbi Yashiv said that no, that's one kli. Cover on the pot is considered one kli. In Mitzvah, either next time or the time afterwards, I'm going to tell you a really unexpected din that comes out of it. Okay, Rabbi first has a special sheet that comes out of that sock that I just told you. Okay, then you put a pot in with a pot that's covered. Rabbi Yashiv says that's al Tevillas Kli. That's just one kli. That's not two keilim. Rabbi first has a very unusual, unexpected chiddush. Okay, the person you make this kli. If you have a lot of keilim, the Mechaber just said is you make one bracha. Okay, so you make one bracha. Or if there's a lot of people, one person can make the bracha for everybody. It's a birchas hamitzvahs. A birchas hamitzvahs, one person can make it for other people. You can make it even if they're not being yotzei. Okay, you can make it for other people. So there are those who say that if I'm making the bracha and I have metal and glass keilim at the same time, what I should do is make the bracha on the metal ones which are chayim with the rice. Okay. Two more things I feel about the bracha, and that is first is. The bracha is made like usual. So you make the bracha before you make the tevillah. There's a shayla in Rabbi Kiva and others about what happens if the person forgot. Okay, he forgot to make the bracha and he already did the tevillah. Can he make the bracha afterwards? And the last thing is, we spoke about. Did I say too many things?
No. What is that?
I didn't say what.
So what did you say? It was a shayla.
I'm not going to tell you. Okay, I should put that on the sign, but I'm not going to tell you that. Okay, you can look it over here. Okay, and the last thing is, we spoke about, I think it was last time, that a person doing Tevillas Keilim in a mikveh used for people. So over here, Rabbi Yashiv says it in. I'm not sure that everybody agrees to that. Rabbi Yashiv says it in that says like this. You're not allowed to make a bracha or say davar shebekdusha in a room where people bathe, okay? Assuming that you're not allowed to make a bracha in that place. So in the place, if it's a people mikveh, then the actual place, the room that has the mikveh in it, and even the rooms, one room out, where people get dressed and undressed, in those rooms you're not allowed to say davar shebekdusha. So, presumably. You're not allowed to say davar shebekdusha. So he says, if a person is being Tevillah a kli in a mikveh that's meant for people, he should go out two rooms. That's the room where everyone's always dressed, sort of like, so to speak, the waiting room, and make the bracha there, and then walk in and do the tevillah, and that walking in, which would usually be considered a hefsed, you're not supposed to have a hefsed, in this case it's not, because that's the way to do it. Okay? That's how Rabbi Yashiv says you should do it. You should start in the very outside room, the waiting room we call it, go through a dressing room, all the way into the place where the tevillah happened, and then tevillah the kli. Okay? What's not so clear about it is that it's true that you're not supposed to make a bracha in that place. It's assumed that you're not going to make a bracha in that place. But what's the din when a lady goes to mikveh? Okay, so the Mechaber says when a lady goes to mikveh, she does make a bracha in there. Okay, you do make a bracha in that room. So the Mishmur explains, well, you're not going to make a bracha. You shouldn't be making a bracha in that room. He says, but in that case, his words are, rak berchas atfil you're allowed to do, she hechrech sham. Okay, it's like you have no choice but to make it in there. Okay, what does it mean you have no choice? Well, you have no choice. That means it's because if you tell the lady she should make the bracha in the way outside room, which is where you're allowed to really make brachas, that means you're telling her, go make a bracha over here, and now it takes a long time until you're ready to be tevillah. Okay? There's a lot of time between being in the outside room till you get undressed, make sure you have no chatzitzes, and go and be tevillah. There's a lot of time in between from here to here. So that's considered hechrech. There's no choice to make a bracha. You can make a bracha 15 minutes beforehand. It's not realistic. It's not the way to make a bracha. So you have to make it over here. So the question is, Well, what about for Tevillas Keilim? Is that also hechreiches? Because what I say is I can't. What am I supposed to do? We're going to make bracha all the way out there. So you could look at it like that. He said, come on, the 1 minute to walk in, which usually would be chatzitza. You don't make a bracha now and eat an apple in a minute from now. Usually that would be considered a hefsek. But he said, yeah, it's not such a big deal. That's what you're supposed to do because you can't make a bracha here. Okay, but you could have understood it that it's just as hechreiches to make the bracha on the Tevillah here as it is for the lady. It's not as much of a stretch, but it's also there's a thing that would be considered a hefsek, that thing in between them. Yeah, but that's what he says, that you should make the bracha on the way out.